and welcome. In this video, I'm going to give you an overview of my course project in Blackboard. Specifically, this course is a 9th grade social studies course at the K-12 level, and the course is titled World History and Geography, and the lessons focus on World War II. So these focus on Indiana history standards, but these standards are also focused in other grade levels and content areas, primarily at the 9th and 10th grade level in the US. For this example, I am using 9th grade social studies. It is a linear course design, so students progress through the activities in a step-by-step manner, partly because a historical topic like a war lends itself to linear very easily because of the dates and building off of one another. However, students do have some choice in the learning resources, topics, and activities that they can complete. The target audience here are 9th graders. They're about 14 to 15 years of age, primarily in the US in this distance learning environment, but it could be students in any high school level, 9th grade of this age group within the United States, out of different states all across the country. The students in this class would represent a diverse population, and that's why there are options built into the assignments, and accessibility principles and universal design for learning guidelines are implemented, specifically because there's students who might have IEPs and special needs. ELL and language barriers might be addressed in these lessons, 504 plans, and then the students would also represent diverse socioeconomic statuses and ethnicities. So some of the course objectives are included within the Blackboard course in the syllabus, but basically students are aiming to understand and develop historical research skills in a variety of research projects throughout the duration of this course. They're seeking to utilize primary and secondary sources to explain, interpret, and analyze events of the past, collaborate with peers as a valuable part of a team, conducting historical research primarily in that role, communicating their ideas effectively using written communication tools as well as multimedia communication skills and tools, connecting the events of the past to the present, and then ideally demonstrating historical knowledge with accuracy and recalling events of the 20th century. Furthermore, there's several activities that in part were designed in this unit to build off of one another, ideally starting from a more basic level Bloom's taxonomy level to getting up to more complex, higher order thinking like creating, designing, evaluating, and analyzing. In the first lesson or first mini lesson in a bigger, larger unit on World War II, the students are learning about the causes of World War II. World War II was selected because it is one of the topics that students across the country in the United States of America have standards and must study. So this felt like a pretty relevant topic to include in the distance learning course. To start off with this, they're going to learn about the topic of causes of World War II by watching a video lecture presented by the teacher and participating in interactive Pear Deck slides. This is purely a completion activity to make sure that they learn the content. The next part is an opportunity for review. The students select 2 resources that they would like to study to help them build and review the content presented in the video lecture, as well as practice their information. 2 of the options listed out of the 5 are review games. Another one is a review session with the teacher on a scheduled date the student could opt to attend. The 4th option is a reading from a reputable historical resource and museum. And the last option is a tutorial video. So the students get to pick 2 of those or more to review in preparation for recalling and remembering and comprehending the information as they will in a Causes of World War II quiz. This quiz is 5 questions. The questions are all free response, and they have 2 attempts to complete this quiz. The next mini lesson in this larger unit lesson is the events of World War II in 1.2. In this activity, students will research a historical event in World War II from a list provided by the teacher, and they'll post some of their initial research in a discussion. This requires the students to dig a little bit deeper and then reframe the information, building up from that level of Bloom's of just basic remembering to explaining. They'll post in the discussion and they'll seek their responses and feedback from 2 peers and also provide feedback to 2 peers. This is really important because the students get to interact with each other, which is valuable for fostering communication and community in the classroom. But it's also helpful because the students will use this feedback to help them design their next phase of this activity in this lesson, which is building upon this to create a bigger project, which is an educational infographic about their historical events. Ideally, the feedback they get from their peers in their initial research could help guide and improve their finished product before they make that infographic. The last phase of this lesson is 1.3, Impact of World War II. In this unit activity, they'll specifically focus on some of the lesser known historical groups. Because I said this group of students in this target audience is a very diverse population, oftentimes they won't see themselves represented in traditional history textbooks. In this lesson, they're going to be focusing on the impact of World War II on different minorities and how the war helped but also hindered some movements for equality for certain groups. They're going to be working in groups of 3 on a collaborative wiki, and they are responsible for understanding and communicating information about their specific group and how the war impacted them. So examples might be Navajo code talkers and women in the war effort. Each group member has a specific role, and ideally they're creating one informational page about their topic. The whole group together is working on that. Each student is responsible for their page, and they'll also comment on other peers' responses in their pages as well. So it's a whole class effort to make a repository of information. This last activity in this unit is a persuasive video project where students are pulling this all together and making things personal and connecting, which was one of the course objectives. In this activity, students are going to be given a scenario where they are a consultant for an educational company, and they're going and working with a school district who is considering not including World War II as one of their curriculum objectives. The student's responsibility is to try to persuade this curriculum director to go one way or the other, to explain why World War II is significant today, or maybe why they don't think it's as relevant, and some of the lessons that we can learn from studying this war. Ideally, the students are going to be pulling in information they've gleaned from the activities beforehand to develop this analytical, evaluative response. So again, we start here in the remember basic levels of blooms, and we build all the way up to evaluating in their persuasive video project and creating in that video project, as well as the infographic. There's ways to deter academic dishonesty several times in this course that are built into the assignments. First of all, the free response quiz questions don't lend themselves to just looking up an answer. They require the students to apply information and to construct and use their own evidence. There's more than one correct answer here, so ideally it's framed to where students won't see the need to cheat on that, and they won't easily be able to. There's a lockdown browser, and there's multiple attempts to complete this quiz, as well as it being timed to deter cheating too. Another clear thing here is that there is plagiarism check on the assignment where students could possibly copy information from another source, and that's the infographic assignment. Plus, there's also other built-in ways to deter academic dishonesty. The students on the syllabus, it's mentioned that students will adhere to a classroom academic honesty pledge. A sample one's provided in the syllabus, but ideally the students would engage in activity at the start of the school year where they all develop this together and sign it and agree it, and the teacher reminds them of this. Furthermore, the teacher communicates expectations and rubrics for every single assignment in this course as a way to help make things clear to students so they won't see a need to cheat, but they'll have the ability and resources to complete the assignments on their own. So these are the explanations of activities I have in this course.
So now that you've gotten the overview and really the big idea and plan behind this unit project, here is an overview of what this actually looks like in the LMS Blackboard. So right now I'm in a teacher view, so I'm going to toggle over into students so you can kind of get that feel for it. But the great thing about this course is that all of the content on this was created by me. It's not something that had to be, I guess, referenced from other places. Any images I used were Creative Commons licensed images that you're allowed to, basically were on the public domain, so you could easily use them. And I've noted where I've gotten those from. So that helps in lending this being something that can be maintained over time. But it's also helpful that this is set up a certain way in the way it is in Blackboard LMS, because it can be exported into a common cartridge file that is the IMS Global approved format for that, which means that it's transferable into any other LMS that is also IMS Global compliant, which is most of the options that are out there today. So again, this can be sustained over time and improved because it has the ability to be transferred out of this LMS into another one should this LMS no longer be available or there's a better alternative out there. So if I toggle into student view, this is what we see here. So again, this is an LMS that's intended for 9th, 10th grade world history and geography students. Specifically, it's focusing on a unit in world history focused on World War II. So to start off, I have my announcement here that welcomes the students to the class because it's really important that students really have some connection with their teacher in a distance learning environment. This is brought up multiple times in our text, Teaching and Learning from a Distance by Smaldino et al. And it's really important to kind of forge that connection while also making sure that instructions are clear. So right here, it guides the students to the resources that they need to be going to that first lesson and the introduction activities. So I look here, I see this, and if I wanted to get moving and start this lesson, I could click Introduction, Start Here, and then it takes me into the resources here that I've created for these students. So this unit would usually not be one that's at the very start of the school year, but I did put some introductory materials on here for the students as if it was a course that had some of those content pieces built in. Because again, it's important that students know where they're going and have any questions they might have addressed pretty early on. And the syllabus and introduction activities can help fulfill that. So if I click here, here is the syllabus, and there's also a visual example that's here, but there is a typed out version that's all embedded within this content block here. Explains information about the instructor, best times to contact the instructor and how, required materials, schedule of activities, and deadlines here so the students know what to expect, grading policies and course policies, and then a breakdown of grades here, some expectations, plagiarism policy, as well as a helpful guide here that explains to students some plagiarism and citation best practices in a visual sense, information on late work, scoring criteria, and then here is the visual syllabus also embedded, but also could be accessed through that link there. So different means of representation here so the students can understand this content in a visual way with less text, which might be helpful to some of the students who might be special education or ELL newcomers, but then also the more text-heavy version up here that describes this all in more detail. So that is the first step here, and to get back, the students would just click back here, and then here is the next piece, which is a welcome message from the teacher. Talks a little bit about the teacher, which is me, likes and dislikes, and kind of does a little intro activity here and models a welcome activity. The video does have closed captions automatically, and it's linked there, and they can also just watch it embedded. All right, helpful resources also linked here, which include just some tips on how to be a successful student in distance learning environment. This is a very different type of setting than your traditional face-to-face classroom because students in a distance learning environment could be scattered across the country, across the globe, and might have very unique and different settings depending on where they are. So with that being said, it's helpful to be very supportive of students and do as much front loading as you can to possibly support their executive functioning skills and their ability to self-regulate because you're not physically there in the classroom with them to pick up on those visual cues like you might be able to in an in-person setting. So with that being said, I put some resources here on when to contact the teacher, as well as some resources for helping the students stay organized. Research reliable resources. The students will be doing research in this social studies class. So here's a collection of websites they can use in that endeavor. But then there's also some resources here that talk about how to be successful as a distance learning student in general. So relaxation and where to also get tech help because as a distance learning student, you're going to be relying on technology a little bit more heavily than you might in another setting. All right, so going back, the next activity here is really built off of this modeled introduction activity, and it's a class introduction. So this is a chance for the students to interact with each other, which again is a very important piece here in a distance learning environment. You don't want students to feel like they're learning in isolation. So building in some options and opportunities for students to interact with one another makes it more of a learning community. So this specific activity is a class introduction where students post in this discussion forum. They introduce themselves. Again, the teacher modeled this by making her own post on here, me talking in third person, but I put my own post here so the students could see what this is like. And they could use my example here to help them make their own posts. So the students are supposed to write their own discussion posts here and answer a couple questions that were outlined on that introduction activity. So the next thing is that after students have completed the intro activity is when they're supposed to go over here to the lessons and assignments tab, and that's where they're going to be completing activities. Now there are about 15 other buttons that could be added here, but I hid some of them so it's not as overwhelming for the students. Don't need all of the buttons if I'm not going to be using them. So I specifically only made things active that students are going to be using in this course. So if I click lessons and assignments, we have some options here. There's a course introduction again, which is where we just were. And then we have the actual unit of focus here. So there is a little intro here, kind of an anticipation guide of sorts for this unit by having a word cloud here that talks about some of the common terms of vocabulary that students will be anticipating to learn as a part of this unit. And if I click World War II unit, there are 3 lessons in this unit, although they're very closely related. So it really could almost be like 2, but there's technically 3 broken up into 3 mini lessons in this one unit. All right. And because this is a historical topic where we're going to be outlining the causes of World War II, the events, and then the lasting impact, It's a very sequential study of history, and that's the reason why the distance learning module here is set up as a linear design. So there are several different types of distance learning models that are out there that were described in the Smaldino, Svec, et al. Text. And while there are some great options out there that are more of like a hybrid, or a student has a lot of choice in the order and resources that they go through, in this specific example, it made more sense to construct things in a linear format and take students through the historical topics sequentially, because it would be very hard for the students to understand the lasting impacts of World War II if they had never studied the causes or the major events of World War II that lent to those specific impacts. So while there are some choices here, students get to pick resources they learn from, they get to pick some of the activities. The sequence is not something that is really up to choice. The students are following this in a prescribed order, which is a linear design model of distance learning. So if I click 1.1, here are the activities here. And every single unit is set up every single lesson in this unit is set up the same way, where this first page here, activity assignments, and then any other activity or assignments to support the students here. Very similar context. And the reason why it's set up similarly is so that it's not a whole lot of guesswork on the students on where to go. It reduces the cognitive load on them if it is set up consistently throughout the course. All right. So again, similar layout here. Every single unit page is set up this way. It starts with the lesson objectives here, framed in a student-friendly language. Academic standards are linked if the students want to look at those. Agenda and anticipated due dates of items so the students can plan ahead, as well as those being linked. And then there's a brief little introduction here. All right. If I go further down the page, we will see some of the different learning activities. So it's all phrased as steps, which again I think is helpful for the students as well. So students will do a lecture activity here. There's the slides, and then there's the accompanying video. And the video does have closed captions again to support universal design for learning, multiple means of representation, specifically language and symbols and perception, to make it more accessible. All right. We have the Pear Deck slideshow here, and a Pear Deck is an interactive slideshow where instead of students just passively listening to a presentation or looking at slides, they are engaging by answering questions on those slides. So it's a more formative assessment type of tool for the teacher to gauge understanding. All right, there's a due date there. Next thing is an activity where students have choice in what they do next. So while this is a linear design distance learning module, there are some flexible choices here, and the students get to pick what activity that they would like to do. So they get to pick two of the following. They can read, video, live Zoom with the teacher, again, for an opportunity to have some live synchronous options here, a review game, or another type of review game that's more on Quizlet flashcards and vocab terms. So students have to pick two. And the next activity is a quiz. All right. So this quiz is, students have a little bit of time to do this, but this specific quiz in Blackboard is all short answer questions, and they're definitely higher order thinking questions. And it's really to test students' understanding of the causes of World War II that were described in this video, and to have them apply their understanding in more complex type of questions and higher order thinking tasks than just basic rote memory and applying and understanding. This is really moving into more of evaluation and considering, well, how did those events cause these factors? What are your opinions on this? Could have been avoided. So students are applying evidence that they learned from this lesson in these questions here. All right. So the students have opportunities on this test to take it more than once. And there is a lockdown browser, secure browser here that is to help students be deterred from cheating, because that can be something that happens quite frequently in distance learning environments. It could be enticing to cheat because you're not physically in person with the teacher, and you have lots of resources and the world at your fingertips on the internet. So there is a lockdown browser here that students will use, but they have two opportunities to take this test, and the highest score is the one that is utilized. And they can use their notes if they would like to on this. So it again encourages students to have good note-taking practices too. All right. Because the questions are not basic memorization questions, that also lends itself to being a better gauge of student understanding and better assessment practices, because the students aren't just able to look up the answer right away. They have to apply it because it is a free response, short answer, short essay question. Okay, so there we go. We have our first unit here. And if we move further down the page, that is where this test actually is. So here are some examples of this test. Here's a learning target. Ideally, we want the students to get an 80% or better. Here's the standards. Every single question gives you some explanations here on how to take the test. Reminders again that they're going to have multiple opportunities to take this if they so choose, and only the highest score is the one that's going to be entered in the grade book. There's also a rubric that's attached to each one of these short answer questions, so the students can use that almost like a checklist for when they're forming their response and submitting this test. So again, supporting students' ability to self-regulate in their executive functioning skills as defined in the Universal Design for Learning framework is by giving students rubrics, exemplars, and checklists. And rubrics and checklists are both represented in this specific assessment because it's assessed based on free response. The students are given basically a guide that shows them, here's some things you should try to include in your response each time. So here are some of the examples here. 5 free response questions. Here's a question here. And the questions are shuffled every single time too. So this says question 1, but it's actually question 4 in the original version that was made of this. Here's the question. And then the specific rubric is also shown there for the students to utilize as well. So again, they have some ideas on how to do this. All right. So that is an example of that assessment there. So that is the first lesson in this unit. The second lesson builds on that. So first lesson, we were looking at the causes of World War II. Lesson 1.2 focuses on the major events. And something that's key here is that this specific lesson focuses on events that were definitely more widely known, published in historical textbooks, and featured in movies, TV shows, podcasts, but also looking at minority experiences and some of the lesser known events that have not necessarily always been published in history books, so that students get a different, diverse perspective in telling of history, and one that also might represent their diverse backgrounds as well. So if we look here, the objectives for this specific lesson are to explain the events in World War II with competency. They'll be doing some interactive activities here. So while the first lesson was very much individual, this one is a lot more collaborative and team focused. They're going to be participating in a discussion. They're going to be describing events and create an infographic. So we're moving beyond assessment type of traditional assessment measures with a test by moving into this activity where students are going to be creating something, which again is a higher order thinking task. They're going to be creating an infographic about World War II event of their choice. So again, because this is a linear unit, they're following it in a prescribed order, but they do have some options here of what they can do. In this sense, it's what topic or event that they're studying. All right, so again, similar layout here, lesson objectives here in student-friendly language. We have standards here, both Indiana Academic Standards and ISTE, outline of tasks and assignments with due dates. And then we have some reminders here for the students that kind of repeats and sums up some of the lesson content they learned from the last lesson, which is an acronym to help them memorize the causes of World War II. So if we look a little bit further down, we have the instructions here, again, in the same format of step by step by step. So in this first activity, students are going to be engaging in a research discussion. So they're going to be looking at events of World War II, and specifically what they're going to be doing is creating a discussion post where they research an event in World War II and answer 8 questions about the event. Basically, and what they're doing here on that post is just making sure that they are looking at the right research questions and trying to get an idea of what they should be doing before they actually engage in writing their own assessment. So, all right. So here we go. Now you can see more of the assignment. So these are the different choices the students get to pick from. And these are the 8 questions they're going to be answering. And the teacher specifically picked these 8 questions to get students in the right frame of mind, almost like this is a scaffolding task before they build upon this in creating their infographic. So they'll make their own post here, pick their own topic, and do their research. There's lots of research resources linked here in different modalities. There's text-based resources, video, and then also podcasts. And then the students are going to respond to at least 2 other peers' posts. So it's a chance for them to also receive feedback from others, but also provide it to, again, add some interactivity and some class community here. So after students do those little bits, they're going to apply their understanding, and they have some time to do this. They have a little over, they have about 5 days or so to where they get to build their product, which is an infographic. So if we click here, here's description. There's a rubric attached for this assignment as well, which shows the students this is what the teacher is looking for, and this is what you should try to include. So it's almost like a checklist in that sense. The standards are linked again, some information about their task, questions they're striving to answer. And then again, the topics that they're choosing from. And again, the teacher encourages them, pick the same topic you do discussion posts over. Don't want to have to do double work. Some criteria the students are going to be including. And then we have some helpful resources that show students how to accomplish this task. So the teacher provides the students choice in their topic, but they also get choice in what type of infographic creation tool they would like to use. So instead of just saying, pick whatever tool you want, the teacher provides optimized options, which again is another core tenet of the Universal Design for Learning instructional framework. So what we see here is the teacher has set up to where they can pick Google Drawings as an option for their infographic, or they can use Piktochart. And in these examples, there's only two, which again, is helpful not to overwhelm the students with too many choices. The resources linked here so students can start creating right away. There's a tutorial that the teacher has created that's a written guide as well as a video guide with closed captions so it's accessible. And there's an example here so the students can see what does an infographic look like in this tool. The reason being behind this is it's really helpful, especially in a distance learning environment, and really any environment, but especially distance learning, when you're not there physically in the classroom with the students, that you give them the resources to be successful and you do as much explaining and front loading as possible. So by showing the students this is what they could create, this is how you use this tool, and here's an example, gives them ideas and resources so they don't have as many questions, they don't waste time looking up these resources and answers to their resources on their own. The teacher is trying to support the students here so that if they have a question, it's after they've ideally already looked at these resources and use them as scaffolding. So again, resources here to help the students, rubric there, and again, a reminder on the deadline. All right. And this is set up to where students are going to be evaluated to where they can't copy another person's work as well, to again, discourage plagiarism and cheating. So that is the second lesson in this unit. So the third lesson builds upon causes and effects in lesson 1.1 and 1.2 to the lasting impacts. And again, this one focuses on minority history and minority demographic groups and their experiences that are often left out of popular history textbooks. So similar format again, objectives here, student-friendly language, standards, overview of due dates and assignments, and when. Lesson introduction that includes a recap of the past lessons, and we dive right into the instructions. So in this specific activity for this particular wrap-up lesson here in this unit is a group project. So last week, the students had dabbled in some interaction with other students by posting in that discussion and giving feedback to each other. This week, it takes another step further to where students are completing a group research project with a small group of 4. So in this project, students are creating a wiki about a demographic group and their experiences in World War II. They do all of their own research. So then the end goal is that we have a whole class repository of information about all of these groups' experiences that we can all learn and grow from for the ultimate other activity in this lesson, which is the independent activity the students will be doing as kind of a final performance task to show their understanding. So the group research wiki, the students are creating a web page about a group in World War II of their choice. All right. So here are the different groups and topics. The students don't get to necessarily pick their topic. They're put into a group already. The teacher picks the group for them. And then there's also some specific guidance here on what each group member does. So another way to help scaffold group projects and group work, especially if your students have not engaged in this a whole lot, is to give specific assigned roles so everyone is productive and the task is chunked appropriately. And that is what is done right here. Each group member has a specific task. And there's some different informational pieces the students will be adding to their group wiki page. So the teacher, again, helps the students here by adding some instructions for getting started, tells the students how to do this, because this might be the first time they're using this tool. So there's basic demo instructions here to support the students. And then all of their pages have already been created by the teacher. So it's one less thing for them to do. All right, so that's the group research. They're commenting on other groups' pages as well, talking about kind of reflecting to make sure the students are reading each other's pages and learning from them, because there's nothing it's not good if a student spends tons of time and work on a project and the only person who learns from it and sees that wonderful work is just the teacher. It's helpful for students to learn from each other and kind of have an authentic audience, which is another reason why students are reading each other's pages. And the last project here, the final performance task, is where students are creating a persuasive video project, taking all of the pieces they learned about World War II, and they're going to create a video and basically going to say, this is why I think we should continue to study World War II and what we should really focus on in the future. So this is where they're pulling from the information they've gleaned from every single one of these lessons beforehand, but also thinking about, we've studied experiences of World War II from minority demographic groups that often are not given the spotlight. How can we make sure that their history and their stories are still told? All right, so here's a performance task scenario to help the students get excited and frame their mind about it. They're answering this prompt. Here's specific information the students will need to include in their presentation. They have to include a references page and slides. The students are practicing proper research and citation skills. Give them some specifics here on how to design their presentation. So building appropriate and well-designed PowerPoint slides if they're using slides, PowerPoint or Google. Information on making sure their audio is quality. All right, and then they get to choose again what technology tool they would like to use. So for this specific example, there is an option here to do Google Slides and Screencastify to make a screencast recording for their persuasive video project. And again, the teacher has created a link here to the specific resource, tutorial here, and an exemplar for the students to utilize. The other option here is to use a Powtoon. So again, tutorial here for the students on how to use Powtoon and an exemplar for them as well. Deadline here, reminder to ask questions if they have them, and then linked at the bottom, but also here at the top, is a rubric that shows the students these are specific things that the teacher is looking for. All right, so here are the way the teacher has set up this assignment, and its levels. And all of these specific items are outlined there in the checklist for the students to help them do this task. So that is this unit in a nutshell. The aim behind this unit is to make sure that students get a diverse understanding of historical events, especially major events like this, which was the bloodiest conflict in human history, which aligns with the National Council for the Social Studies, making sure students understand diverse perspectives and understand that history is a story and it changes depending on who is telling the story. Students are also engaging in research skills here, which is another core tenet of the National Council for the Social Studies. Modern 21st century social studies framework is using historical evidence from primary and secondary sources, which students do in their group wiki research project, as well as in their infographic project. They're asked to include primary and secondary sources from the past, but also from the present. This activity in this unit also is sustainable and kind of aligns with the AECT standards, specifically Content Standard 3, that focuses on being able to support an infrastructure for learning, because this can be exported into an IMS Global Common Cartridge package and uploaded into other lessons, as I mentioned at the very beginning. So I hope this has been a helpful informational experience and you've enjoyed learning about this particular course. If you have any questions or you would like to see another rendition or have access to this course, please let me know. Thank you for watching.